Hey everyone, Dylan of Harmonic Design here with another video. Gotta apologize in advance. There's a bit of construction going on in my building. Hopefully the mic won't pick up any of the incessant banging and noise, but fingers crossed on that one. So what we're going to be building today is we're just going to be building a very lightweight and streamlined vanilla JavaScript tab system. So we're going to be able to click on whatever tab we want and have the content automatically change underneath. It's going to look good. And it's going to be, for the most part, very accessible, stuff like that. So it should be a lot of fun to build out. And with that, let's just jump in and get started right in it. So what we have here is we have three of files. Here we have our index.html, our script.js, and our style.css file. These are the only three files we're going to need. Let's open them up, and feel free to open them up in whatever your favorite code editor is. For me, that happens to be VS Code. I know how to spell. So here we have the HTML file, and at this point there is really absolutely nothing special. We're importing the style sheet, we're importing the JavaScript, and that's it. Our JavaScript file itself is just completely empty at this point, but this is where all our JavaScript is going to go. And here's our CSS style sheet, which is also pretty much completely empty. If you've seen any of my videos before, you'll already know what this is, but it's basically just like it's kind of like my own custom normalizer, if you want to call it that. But basically everything you see here, none of this is mandatory for the actual project. This is just to make things look a little bit nicer. So with that, let's jump in and get started with the coding. So the first thing we're going to need is we're going to need to actually design our HTML. So our HTML will, basically our entire element will be wrapped inside of a class. And we'll call the class HD tab. So this div here is going to house basically everything. You know what? Let me go in and make this a bit bigger. I'm guessing it's under appearance. That's not what I wanted. There we go. Make this a bit bigger, easier for you guys to see there. That's better. Yeah, so everything we're going to do is going to be housed inside of this class here called HD tab. Now this div here needs to have two sub elements. It needs to have one element that's going to contain the actual tab items, like the menu item, and it's going to have another element that's going to contain the tab content. We'll call it I don't know, HD tab nav, and we'll call this HD tab content. And the reason I'm using classes instead of IDs is because you might have multiple tab elements on the same page. So by using classes, it just makes it a bit more expandable. So now inside of the HD tab nav, we need to actually write our menu items. Now, most people, you'll see them use like li and an unordered list for this. But especially for, it makes a bit more sense with navigation. Because with the navigation, you can have like sub-navigation and drop-downs. And this kind of, by definition, has a hierarchy, has a kind of parent-child relationship. But the problem is you basically creating an unordered list, and then you're going out of your way to remove the stylings of a list to make it look like how you actually want it to look. And since tab items don't have drop-down navigation, it doesn't really make sense to use a UL for that. So we're just going to use actually a straight div. So we're going to say div class equals HD tab nav item. Sure. And we'll give this first one, well, first, I guess let's figure out why we would ever want tabs. Let's say you have an e-commerce site and you sell food, you sell some kind of food item. So you might want to have a tab for description, which will have like a kind of longer description of your site, kind of like what WooCommerce does in HD Commerce as well, my own e-commerce platform. And then you might want to have another tab for ingredients to show the ingredients of the product. And then you might want to have a third tab for reviews so that users can easily see reviews. Obviously, you can use whatever content you want in these tabs, but I'm just going to use that as a sort of more real world example. So we'll call this description. So in here, we're actually going to do some little interesting things. So first thing I'm going to say here is I'm going to say aria role equals button. And the reason I'm doing that is because divs aren't supposed to be like clickable items. They're not actually buttons themselves. They're not clickable items. So by saying aria role equals button, we're basically letting screen readers know that this is a clickable item, right? So that's going to be very important for them. And we're also, I'll do the next part after. I'll explain the next part after. So I'm going to copy this 3 times, once for description, once for, what did I say, ingredients. How do you spell ingredients? Is it with an E or an A? It's got to be with an E, right? Yeah. I'll just assume it's an E, or make fun of me for being an idiot in the comments. And we'll call that reviews. So this is basically our navigation system. But here's the thing, we need a way to know which of these we click on. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give us a custom attribute that we'll call data ID. You can call this whatever you want. I'm just calling it data ID. And we'll say description. And once again, you can use whatever you want in the ID. Just make sure it's unique. Just make sure it's unique. That's going to be really important if you have multiple, tab elements on the page. So we'll call this ingredients. And the reason I'm using this will become extremely important once we get into the JavaScript. It'll make a lot more sense later. So here we have our this is the kind of navigation of the actual tabs that you click on. Now we need a way to actually show that content. So here we'll say div class equals HD tab content item. Might as well keep the same consistency there. And we'll say ID equals HD tab, and then we'll use this. So it looks like that. Now inside this, we'll just say, I don't know, H3, and we'll say description. We'll just use some lorem ipsum, just some Greek dummy text in there. And this is how a tab item will look. So we'll copy this 2 more times, and we'll change this to ingredients. We'll change this to reviews. So with tabs, you only ever want one of these items to show at a time, right? And the one that shows is the one that is either enabled by default or the one that you click on. So the reason we have this data ID is just to make it really easy to know, like if I click on ingredients, that I know that I can just go HD tab underscore ingredients and just know that this is the one I need to show. So that's what makes it very easy. So let's go in, open this up and see how it actually looks. And by the way, it's going to be ugly. So this is how it looks out of the gate, but we haven't done any styling. We haven't done anything on it yet. So let's get in and start with that. Actually, I think one of the first things I want to do is, so this is outside of the HD tab element, but I mean, generally speaking, if you add a tab, you're not going to be adding it to like a blank page. You're going to be adding this to your own website. So just to make it look a bit more like an actual website, we'll put this inside a wrap tag, a wrap div. And just for simplicity, I'm actually just going to inline it just to explain what's going on. And we'll say, I don't know, for rem auto max width, I don't know, we'll say max width. Actually, let's make it small just for the video. So let's go back and take a look at how that looks. And you'll see that already it looks a bit better. All I did was basically set the, created a div called wrap, made it so that it has a maximum width of 800 pixels. And then I just centered it on the screen with a bit of top bottom padding just to make it look a bit nicer. So it's not like touching the roof of the page here. But now we need to get into the actual styling to make this look like, well, look like tabs. So I guess one of the first things we want to do is we want to get this working well. So let's go to our style sheet, and here I'm just going to mark it. So basically everything below here is like HD tab specific. Imagine that this was CSS that was like already built into your website. It's not actually part of the HD tabs. So this is the navigation. So there's lots of ways that we can actually do the navigation. So for instance, we could do display grid, we could do floats, but I personally think probably for this situation, the easiest way is to go display flex. So I don't know how well you're going to be able to see the console here. I don't think there's a way for me to increase the size of the console here, but you know, just to show you that if I make it display flex, it goes from stacking top to bottom to stacking side by side. So that's what we're going to do here. So we're going to go here, we're going to go display grid, and then we're going to go .hd tab nav. That is what I called it, right? Tab nav item, yeah. And I'm going to say, I don't know. Actually, let's give it some padding. No, I'm gonna want padding on here. So we'll go into that in a sec. I'm just gonna say margin right. I don't know, 1 rem. Here, let's say padding 1 rem. So this isn't gonna look the best, but just to give you an idea. Oh, I'm so used to using display grid that I typed in grid just by like reflex. There we go. So that looks already quite a bit better. So here I am. So you can see this is what the entire tab looks like. So just to show you here, if I say background color red, just to show you, you know, how that actual element displays. And now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to, you know what? By the way, now that I'm seeing this, I changed my mind. I don't want this padding here. I do want the padding here, because this is actually going to make things a lot better, because I no longer need the margin, I no longer need the margin offset, blah, blah, blah. Just trust me, this makes things easier. But what we do want is we're going to want to have some kind of border. So I'm going to just say, for simplicity, I'm just going to say border on 1 pixel solid. I don't know. Let's just do like a light gray. Let's take a look at how that looks. So there we go. So that's how that looks. That looks pretty good to me. Not perfect, but it looks pretty good to me. But we can make this look a lot better still. Once again, I'm not sure how well, you know, I'm going to actually darken this up for the recording. So I think I used EEE. Let's use AAA, a much darker color, just so that the recording is able to see it a lot better. So now let's go in it and let's do some issues here, because what I'm actually going to want to round the corner on the top left and the top right, and see how the border's actually doubled here. The border is twice as thick here and here, because we got a border right, and then here we got a border left. So let's go and fix that so that looks a lot nicer. So now I'm just going to say HD tab item first child. And I'm going to say border radius. Actually, I'm going to say border top left radius. And I don't know what a good number is, but I'm just going to say 0.4 EM for now. We'll change that later. Let's do the same for the last child. Except for this time, instead of top left, it's going to be top right. Let's just take a look at how that looks already. That looks pretty good. I like that, actually. You know, we got these nice rounded corners on the top left and the top right, but we still got the double border here. So now let's say, we'll say here, we'll say border right, nope, none. Or you know what, we'll actually say border right color. We'll actually just make it transparent. Because the thing is, I'm still gonna want it to take up the 1 pixel space. Right, I'm still going to want it to take up the 1 pixel space. And then here on the last item, because we removed it on the right, I'm going to want to add that back in, border right color, and I'm just going to say initial. Let's take a look at how that looks. And there we go. Although maybe I actually shouldn't, yeah, that's the wrong, I shouldn't say initial, I should say the AAA, because that's the color I chose. There we go, now it looks a lot more consistent. So there we go, that looks a lot better now. We're not quite done with the styling yet, there's still more to go. So now let's go in and make it so that it's cursor pointer, so that it goes well. And now we need an active class. So I'm going to say dot active. I'm going to say cursor pointer none. And the reason for that is because we don't want the user to click the tab that's already open. Like it's already open, you don't need to click it again, and we need to just really hammer home how obvious it is that this is the active active tab, sorry. So we're also going to want to add a background color. What would be a good background color? Maybe this would be the good E. And then here in our index file, we're going to actually want to set this first tab as active. And you know what? We're going to want to do the same for our first tab item content. So first, let's go back here just to show you how that looks. Because we want description to be the active tab, that's the one that's there. And I just realized I made a mistake. Lots of mistakes here. I don't want cursor. I don't want to hide the cursor. I just want it to be default. That was dumb of me. Yeah, but as you can see, the active tab is kind of grayed out almost because it's already active. But the other ones, the cursor changes to the typical click cursor. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good. That works pretty good. So now what we want to do is we want to go and we want to hide all of these except for the one that's active. So we're going to go here. We're going to say, and we're just going to say display none. Then we're going to go underneath and we're going to say that same thing but active, and we're going to say display block. And we're going to go back to our this, and we'll see that now only the content for description is showing, the rest is hidden. So I think that from a design perspective, there's really only one more thing we need, and that is to make we need a way to make this tab look better. So what I'm just going to do, I'm just going to say padding 1. Did I say REM or EM? I think I said EM, didn't I? Let's go back here. Did I use EM or REM? Oh, I used REM. Okay. Yeah, so I gave it some padding, and now I'm going to give it a border, 1 pixel solid. I think I used AAA. Yeah, that looks decent to me. What I might do is I might make this a rounded corner as well. Yeah, you know what? Let's do that. I like that idea a lot. So we're going to go and change. Actually, we should probably put this here just for that way it follows the same order as the HTML. I'm going to say padding 1 REM. I'm going to say border 1 pixel solid over AAA. I'm going to say border radius. What did I choose before? 0.4 REM. Or I used actually EM for this case. And then I don't want the border radius top. Border. Oops. I want top left. I want that to be 0. So let's go take a look at how this looks. So there we go. So now all of the corners are rounded except the top left corner here, because we want it to look like it almost extends into the navigation. And now, I mean, this is kind of dealer's choice on whether you like it or not, but now the only thing I'm not too happy with is how these also have a border bottom. So I'm going to say border bottom none. Oops. Well, you got the idea. Let's go fix that right now. So under the nav item, I'm going to say border bottom none. I think this should look a lot nicer. Yeah. So this looks really nice so far. This is really nice and clean. I think the HTML looks great. I mean, it's very simple and straightforward. Works to me. I mean, there's a couple minor things you might want to do. Like, for instance, change the margin here on the H3. But I mean, that's really different because the content, you can put any content you want in here. You can put images, accordions, other tabs, video, whatever you want. You can put inside any of these content areas. So now that we got our HTML markup written and we have our, we have it styled reasonably, maybe you think this looks really nice and clean. Maybe you hate it. It doesn't really matter because the point is make it look however you want, right? I mean, that's the beauty of web design and development. You have the power to do whatever you want. You don't need to use rounded corners if you don't want. Don't need to deal with a the border colors and stuff if you don't want. This is just the direction that, you know, I spontaneously felt like going through here on the video. But now we get to go into the more fun part, the part that most of you are probably here for, which is the actual JavaScript itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new I'm going to create a new object, and we'll call it HDT, sure, for HD tabs. And inside here, we're going to have a function called inits. So remember, this is actually an object. So this object now contains a function called init, which means I can do this. And this will now run this function. So just to show you how that looks, it says hello world. By the way, you could ignore these uncaught and promise errors. That's just because I'm currently using the Vivaldi browser, and it's just caused by one of the extensions I have installed. These errors here have nothing to do with what we're doing. I apologize. Just do your best to ignore them. So now inside this init function, what we want to do is we want to grab basically each tab. We want to grab each of these tab navigations and create an event listener to figure out when they've been clicked on. So I already forgot what they're called. They're called HD tab nav item. So here we're going to say const nav items equals document.get elements by class name HD tab nav item. And now this variable contains every single element with that class. So now we can do a for loop. For let I equals 0 while I is less than nav items dot length I plus plus, and we can go nav items I dot add event listener, and we'll do a click event. And what do we want to happen when we click? I guess we'll say HDT dot tab. I don't know. We'll call it HDT dot tab. So we're going to run this function every time a nav item is clicked. So now let's add that function to the site, or to the object here. So here's the tab, HDT dot tab, HDT dot tab. Just like we want HDT dot init for here, we're running HDT tab for here. So now what we want to do is, if you remember, I had that custom data attribute embedded in here, right? So we're going to want to grab that data attribute. So we're going to say const ID equals this dot get attribute data ID. So let's just console log that out just so you can see it. So you can see if I click ingredients, it says ingredients, it says reviews, it says description. You know, easy peasy, right? Working great. But before we get into that, before we get into that, what we want to do is we want to find the current active. We want to find the current active navigation item so that we can remove it, basically. So you know what? I'm actually going to make another change here. So right here, I called it just basic active. It actually makes more sense to use a more long form class name. That way we can grab it directly. So I'm going to go in. So what I did here is I just basically copied the same class name that I was using previously, except appended underscore active to it at the end. So I can actually just do that. I mean, at least the CSS is easy to change. So that's great. So what this does is in the JavaScript, it just makes it a hell of a lot easier to find what we're looking for here. So now I can say const active nav equals document dot get elements by class name. And now, I mean, here's the thing. You never know, like you might have multiple tab items on the page, or maybe the user manipulated the DOM themselves with, what's it called? The developer tools, right? The inspect developer tools. So we're just going to do a while loop. So we're going to say while active nav.length is greater than 0. active nav 0 dot classless dot remove helps if I spell while correctly. So there we go. So what we're doing is we're just basically finding any element on the page with this class name, and we're removing that class name from the element. And since active nav will like constantly update that it's a direct reference to the elements on the page, this will work this will work in every single situation. So now that we have that done, we also want to add the class to the current clicked item. So we're going to say this dot class dot add, and this should work. It won't show and hide the content, but it should animate the navigation here. So let's go take a look at that. So if I refresh, see, and now we have that clicking and working beautifully. This actually looks really nice. I like how just simple and clean and smooth this is. It works really well. So now we need to actually show and hide the content. And we're basically going to do the exact same thing here as far as, this, so we're going to also say, we're actually doing basically the same thing. So let's just copy this here, except instead of active nav, we'll say active contents. Just rename it to content. Then we're going to say, document.getElementById HD tab. I think that's what I used, right? Yeah, HD tab underscore, then plus ID dot class list dot add HD tab content item nav. Remember, ID is what we got up here, the attribute for the data ID, which we got from here. So already this should work. This should be a completed tab navigation system. And as you can see, it's correctly changing. Let's just use a, isn't there a way to get like a random unsplash image? They do have like an API for it, I think, right? Here we go, get a random photo. Oh, do they not have just like a URL anymore for it? I guess they just don't have like a random URL. Oh, maybe they do? I don't know, whatever. The point is you can put any content you want there. I don't know why I went on that tangent. Maybe what I'll do is I'll just actually randomize the lorms here just to show more versatility. Let me switch the camera back. There we go. So now we just have a bit more versatility in the tab content, so it's a bit more obvious when the tab changes. So this works. This looks great. It's very expandable. It's very easy to design and manipulate. Right now, it's just kind of like instantly changing, which, by the way, I actually kind of like. But you could pretty easily, add some slight, basic animations and stuff. Like, for instance, if I go to the nav item, I can do transition all ease and out. I don't know, 300 milliseconds or something like that. Like I'm just guessing here. You see now, I don't know how well the recording is going to pick this up. Maybe I'm actually just going to update that 3000 milliseconds to 1000 to a full second, just to make it even more obvious for the recording here. But if I click, see how it has this like really slow fade because I set it to a full second. But I mean, you can absolutely do things to, animate some things and make it look a little nicer. I would actually be pretty comfortable deploying this live on my products. There's really just two things that I would want to do. The first is I'd want this to be keyboard navigationable. Even though we did the ARIA label the ARIA role equals button to announce the screen readers for visually impaired people that, hey, these are clickable elements and you can click this. there's still things that you could do better. For instance, making it keyboard navigatable. So you could like tab to it, press the space bar, and have it, you know, click each one. In fact, you know what? This has been a pretty quick video so far. We're literally just hit the 30-minute mark. Let's actually go in and do that. There's no reason not to do that. So what we're going to want to actually do for that is we want to go back here to our class, to our basically the tab navigation. We're just going to want to say tab, I think it's called tab index equals 0. I'm pretty sure this is all we need. Technically, you're not supposed to do tab 0, but for situations like this, it really is pretty much the only way to do it. So now if I press tab, see that? See how if I press tab, it actually goes through and highlights? That's beautiful. So now what we want to do is we want to make it so that when you actually press a keyboard button, it'll basically behave as if you clicked it with the mouse. So where do we do that? Oh, here we go. So here where we have the event listener click, we're basically going to do the same thing here. Except we're going to say, I guess key up is probably the best one. And I'm just going to do an inline function just to test some things. So I'm going to say, and I'm going to say, because it's been a while since I've actually done keyboard events. So let's just do some basic console logging to test here. Yeah, so if I press a button, see, we're getting these key logs here. So let's go take a look at this. So we're going to say, so it's actually just, well, character code 0. Is space really character code 0? That can't be right. Key code 32. Okay, that makes a bit more sense. Like, let me try a G. What happens if I press G? Is it? I just want to make sure it's getting the right thing. Yeah, okay, it works. It works. Yeah, so key code 32. So that's what we'll use as the reference. Let's go back here. And we'll say if e.key code equals 32, then we'll say hdt.tab this. Will this work? Let's go here and see EL. By the way, I 100% expect this to do to be an error here. Okay, so it actually, so exactly what I thought would happen happened. So we are correctly passing that. So what we need to do here is, because of scoping, like this here refers to a different thing because I'm sending it in different ways. So probably the best way is to say here, if EL equals null, and then what I'll do is I'll say is if EL equals null, then EL equals this. So if we pass it through here, then EL will equal the elements by default. If we don't pass it through here and we pass it through here, EL will be null, and we set it to this. So now I just need to basically there's only 2 places I need to change it. So I actually think this will work. It works. Yeah, so that was me using the keyboard. I was just basically using tab to switch through the... Okay, but now the click doesn't work. So it almost worked. It almost worked. First, let me get rid of... I don't like the slowdown there. Okay, so what happens... So for some reason, it's not working if I click, so let's just debug that. So if I click, okay. So we want it to be el.sourceElements. This dot source element, and that should probably work now. And it didn't work. I'm guessing it's because EL isn't equaling null. This has got to be it. So I'm console logging out here to see whether EL, what EL actually is. Okay, so it's a pointer event. Okay. So what's the best way to actually fix this? The best way to fix this is probably to do this. I don't know why I didn't just do this the first time. Oh, sorry, I didn't. So that's working with tab. Perfect. It's working across the board. Let's just go back here. Let's clean this up. Don't need that console log. So basically all I did was, instead of inlining it, I basically did it inside of the function. That way I could refer to this at the same scope level. I actually don't even need this anymore. I can just do this now. Yeah, and that's basically it. We now have a super awesome tab system that's, for the most part, like fully accessible, screen readable. You know, this should be pretty WCAG compliant. Do I still have that extension? Will Wave work on local? I don't think Wave works on a local. So I'm just going to exit this, and I'm actually not even sure if I have this installed. Okay, cool, I do. So what I did is I'm basically loading this up in a local server here, so I can test the Wave plugin. Okay, so the Wave plugin says 0 errors, 2 alerts, but yeah, it's recognizing the ARIA. Let's see if it's got the structure. Okay, this is just because of this. So this has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But yeah, as you can see, it's got it labeled as a button, and if you click it, so I think we're pretty good here. I'm sure people that are more into accessibility and knows the WCAG standards better could probably find fault with the way that I did things. But I think compared to doing nothing, the little bit of accessibility improvements we did, makes such a huge difference to people with screen readers. So I hope that you learned a lot from this. I'm probably going to upload this to GitHub right now, and I'll have a link in the description below. And with that, I just want to say, if you made it this far, thank you very much. I guess like and subscribe, and enjoy the rest of your day.